Since burning, all space is filled with the fragrance. All Buddhas smell it from afar. Auspicious clouds gather everywhere. With utmost sincerity, all Buddhas appear. We pay homage and offer clouds of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas. We pay homage and offer clouds of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas. We pay homage, we offer clouds of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to do something a little bit different. Can you hear me? Can't hear me? I want to do something a little bit differently today because I want to do a check-in. I want to see where we are in our practices. The Dharma, the Dharma sutras are instructions for practice. It's not like good reading, although it is good reading, but it's more than good reading. It's the guidance that we get for how we conduct ourselves throughout the course of the day and how we take in knowledge and build upon it to promote our ultimate objective. We do have an objective here. And so one should be clear about walking the path, the purpose for walking the path, and the benefit of walking the path, and what one can find is the reward, the ultimate reward of walking the path. Otherwise, we just kind of are in a, what do you call it? When you're trying to self-development. Otherwise, we're just taking a self-development course. But this is not self-development. Of course, you will develop until you ultimately lose the self. So if we aren't careful at how we develop ourselves, instead of inuring towards emptiness, we will develop more self. And we don't even realize it because that's the way of the world, the way of understanding and surviving in the mundane world is around developing the self. So it can kind of be tricky, a play on words and really a play on how we truly walk out our life if we don't understand the distinct difference between being on the flat escalator going towards death versus the way leading upward. And that way leading upward is to a realization. It is partly spatial and not spatial, but a realization of no arising, no ceasing, no birth, and no death. And those are words that make no sense to us when we're functioning from a certain level of consciousness. So the primary purpose of all of our study is not just to know something, but to break through the glass ceiling of our mundane consciousness so that we can, um, I hate to use words that we use like see reality as it is, because that's so trite and it's so not the right idea. But so that we can break free of our delusion. It's kind of like having cataracts, so you can see, but you see dimly, or you can see, but it's distorted or it's obscured, and therefore one could be confused in their walking. They could fall down the steps or they bump into the table because the cataract, the film over the eyes, doesn't allow them to see clearly. So the Dharma is like a surgical procedure that it's nothing wrong with the eye except that it's covered over. And so this is like it's nothing wrong with your intrinsic nature. It's absolutely perfect, um, absolutely free, except that it's covered over and obscured by our obscurations, our habitual tendencies, our erroneous views, our um, uh, the survival mechanisms that we've put uh, that we've taken up that cause us to become closed in. We become fearful, and we don't always recognize it as fear. That word fear is coming to me is because it's mostly what motivates us to do everything that we do, you know, and we don't always use it in the negative, like I'm afraid if I don't do this, then that. But 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 there is fear involved in almost every decision that we make. We don't call it fear, we may call it caution, we may call it prudence. We may call it like just having a preference. This is what I like. But if you look deeply, we will see that there is some underlying fear of not being accepted, of not having enough, or being misunderstood, or not being appreciated, or I mean, you could just run down the whole tick list. And so we will never be free as long as we have this inner obstacle. And so the purpose of this walk is to break the inner obstacle. There is nothing really outer that can uh, hurt us, that can destroy us. It's everything is according to how we look at it. Everything is according to how we hold it. Even if we look at just the wonderful idea of being a bodhisattva, oh, how wonderful that sounds, just loving everybody, and wanting to take on, the troubles of the world, wanting to help people, wanting to do that. But I'm going to tell you, it comes with a lot of suffering unless one has transformed inwardly, then all of that help becomes nothing but a lot of suffering, because helping people who have unfortunate uh, karma puts you right in the mix of their ignorance and their delusion, you know. And so you have to really be up for that, and it can cause one to lose their own ground if they're not up for it. So we have to know what we can do and what we can't do. We have to know how far we can go. We have to know, and uh, even when the Buddha had uh, Chanda, who was his charioteer when he left um, home, and Chanda helped him. I won't call it escape, but he did help him leave, and uh, and uh, and later he left the king's court, his father, Shakyamuni's father's court, and he became a disciple. So there was Chanda, and then there was his brother, cousin, Devadatta, and they had they were monks. They were first line disciples of the Buddha. They were taught everything that everybody else was taught, but they had their own ideas and their own views, and they brought a lot of trouble into the community. The Buddha never put them out. He continued to work with them. Sometimes he even got injured by Devadatta. He tried to push a boulder off of a cliff when the Buddha was walking behind, and it missed him. It just clipped Shakyamuni on his heel, that left him with a injury in his heel. So yeah, even the Buddhas, when they appear in the world in their Nirmanakaya form, they are subject, to whatever karma is ripening in that period. They're not producing any new karma because they have now moved out of the realm of cause and effect. But whatever was the residual in that last lifetime, then they suffer that. That's why there are different stories, but we pretty much surmise that he died from a stomach ailment. Just the spoiled stew was just the last straw. You just get to a place, it's the last straw. And plus he was tired. And he said, that's it, so one decides when one becomes a Buddha, one decides for themselves what time they're going. And not even when you become a Buddha, there are levels that you can attain before Buddhahood. So don't worry about being a Buddha. I mean, just worry about being the best that you can be. And when we do that, that's what I mean by having a vision of the end game. It's not just looking at the goal line, but it's looking at this moment, how to be the best in this moment, how to be as perfect as I can in this moment, and that almost becomes like a 24/7 job. I'm so busy, and I'm not even hardly doing anything, but boy, am I watching, I'm observant, I'm considering everything that I say. He says, think about a thing, before you execute. And then while you're executing, think about it again, and then after you've executed it, think about it again, and make sure that what you intended to do with your good works, what you are in the process of doing, continues in that same vein of goodness. And after you've concluded it, you can look back and say, it was good, and those three times of examination, one can know how well one is doing. And one can know, knows when he's been good or bad. And when you find that there could be some improvement, oh, I was going good for a while, but I got worn out, I finished it though, then you can look at that, but I got worn out, I got weary. And something will crop up in there that'll let you see how you could do better next time. Or that will let you know what your limitation is, you don't have to live up to somebody else's, but you do have to live up to yours. So you can know something about yourself, finding out who you are. And the more we come to know ourselves, the more inner peace we have, and the more happiness, because we become authentic, just within ourselves. So I won't say we don't worry too much when we mess up. I just say that to Westerners because we just so easily get depressed if we think something's wrong with us. So I say it in that sense. You don't have to worry so much if you mess up. How good it is to know where I have fallen short of something because I have a goal in mind. I have a goal in mind. And if I didn't know where I fell short, I would wonder why am I not reaching my goal? Or I would think I'm reaching my goal and be totally deluded, or so it's good to see where where the imperfection lies, you know. So I see that and I'm grateful to see it. I'm happy to see it. I prefer you didn't see it, but if you did see it, just know that in this same manner, one should evaluate themselves. And I tell you, life becomes good either way. At least when you're suffering, you're not like perplexed. Why is this happening to me? I mean, you start to understand where your suffering is coming from, how you are bringing it upon yourself, regardless of who the delivery guy was, you know. But you will know within yourself something that needs to be uh, abandoned, something that needs to be taken up. How could I go through this in a different way? I was listening to um, Tim Rinpoche yesterday, and he said that he was sick and he died fairly young. I think he was around 50 or something like that. He died a couple of years ago, and I'm sorry I never knew of him, before he died, because I think he's a very good teacher, but extremely compassionate towards his disciples, and I think he had an extraordinary um, uh, understanding and grasp of the Dharma. And he was young; he was a movie star, and his karma ripened, and he had to leave that. So he has a lot of game. He had a lot of game with him when he was younger, when he first ordained, and but he could really attract the young people because he was young, and he had such a good grasp of the Dharma, and he was ordained by the Dalai Lama, but in the later years of his life, because that whole Dorji Shugden issue came up, and so he and the Dalai Lama could not talk anymore because a rule came out from the Tibet political machine that anyone who paid homage to Dorji Shugden would then be against the Dalai Lama. And so there came a break. And he would constantly employ, the Dalai Lama, said, let's not cause a schism. You yourself practiced, did Dorji Shugden practice for 30 years. I have done it for 30 years. Let this not be uh, a breach. You want to stop doing it, you stop. I want to continue. I should continue. And but I looked at how much care he put into um, uh, trying to resolve the issue, because it affects hundreds of thousands of Tibetan practitioners. And but so he's of the Gelug sect, and some of the teachings Buddha Master did correct, because he had high level Dharma kings who were in the Gelug sect. He had high level Dharma kings who were in the Nyingma sect. I was reading about one of them this morning before I came, and he had 1 million disciples when he came to Buddha Master. We have it. Buddhism is so little here, we have no idea. But when you get into those countries where they have a kabillion people and they're Buddhist countries, there's a lot of Buddhist practitioners. We are not alone. I just want you to know. And and uh, he just corrected one thing in that Dharma King's practice and in that Dharma King's understanding. Just one thing that over the centuries had gotten mistranslated. Um, and in correcting that one thing, that master attained ultimate liberation, and his body is still sitting in the temple. He's been dead now for, I don't know, maybe 15 or 20 years, but his body still sits there in the temple when he went into meditation and went into final parinibbana. He's not the only one. There are a number of them. Y'all know that, right? Yeah, there are a number of them around the world. There was one they exhumed in Russia, and he entered his final nibbana while he was seated in meditation, and his 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 the blood is still there. His body is still warm, but the blood's like jelly, and the veins are movable. Just everything. These are things that I mean, we don't have to pay that much attention to them, but they're real things, you know. So some things, when they get too much to be too unexplainable, we like just don't talk about it. You know, when I say we, I'm talking about the scientists and the people who lead us in our understanding. When it gets to be that it defies anything they can explain, they just don't. So I wanted to open up the floor and give you a chance to ask some questions, or I would like to clarify anything for you that I could today before we go any further. One thing I do want to talk about is meditation practice, and the way that we are moving forward according to Buddha Master's instructions is that the knowledge has been uh, cut, it's been severed and divided into sects and practices. Beyond the three schools, Theravada, Mahayana, and Vajrayana, you also have all the different sects. So, for instance, in Vajrayana, just in Tibetan Vajrayana, you got the Galups, you got the Sakyas, you got the Kadampas, you got the Nyingmas, you got the Jonang. So those are the five major sects. So the Dalai Lama is not the head of all Tibetan Buddhism; he's the head of the Galup sect. You know, but there are four other leaders who have the same level of passing down of the lineage as the Dalai Lama. You know, it's just that particular one was able to the Galupa is more of a political religious sect, and so due to worldly influences, he became prominent, and it was never corrected that he didn't speak for all of Tibet and so forth. It should have been, because I personally feel that if you don't clarify something that's not true, then you participate in a lie. That's just my view, and that's not throwing any shade. That's just a fact. So if it ain't right, correct it. If it is, my bad. And so sometimes we have a misconception of what things are because we've just gone with what everybody said, We haven't bothered to investigate. We don't really know for ourselves. And that's why the Buddha cautions us about, particularly in this day and time, just going online and listening to anybody who wears a robe or has a big hat on, or who has a fancy title behind their name. It's not so much their teachings as you have to know the teacher. And otherwise, we can find ourselves in a place that we're totally, totally confused. So he said it's better to do a few very simple things, because none of those teachers are going to get you where you're trying to go. The only thing that's going to get you where you're trying to go is your own personal cultivation. And so you can know a whole lot, but if you've only cultivated a little, then you won't make much progress. Now, in cultivating, one aspect of that is the meditation, right? And there's all different kinds of meditations, all different kinds of contemplations, and all different what they call postures in which one can do that. So one person might like do mindfulness because that's what they have a propensity for. That's with what they can accommodate. That's what because this is not to denigrate mindfulness. It's to say that the faculty of mindfulness and mindfulness as a meditation practice are not the same thing. And I think we get that confused. So we think because we're doing mindfulness meditation that we have the faculty of mindfulness, which is an enlightenment factor. And they're two very different things. So you can't like just take a method and do that method every day, whether it's 30 minutes, 45 minutes, whether it's an hour, and go through the steps and do the method and say, I am mindful. I'm a mindful practitioner. This is what I do. That's not developing the faculty. That's not the realization of the faculty of mindfulness, because that mindfulness is connected with everything else that one does in their life. And that mindfulness sheds light on what we do, on what we say, on how we carry ourselves, on how we correct ourselves, on our level of compassion towards others, or whether we can recognize the difference between miserliness or stinginess or pragmatism or generosity or boundless generosity. I like, where are you going with this? You know, where are you on the Richter scale? And so that mindfulness is a clear light that shines on the different aspects or qualities of your character and qualities of your being, so that you know where you are on the path, where you are on the path, where you are on the path, until there comes a place that there is no path. You know, there is no path. There's no one walking a path. You know, and one is just abiding in a kind of clear a way of being in the world that their whole view is how to participate fully in helping others, because one is so content inside. And that contentment comes. I wanted to read something that Buddha Master said, and I saved it for you today. And I'm saying this so that we don't get too caught up in the methods. That's where I'm going with this, that we should have methods. We don't need to have all the methods, we need to pick one that we find affinity with, and just work with that method and until we get some results. But here he was talking about I have so much writing. Uh, he was talking about the practice of a bodhisattva. Give me a second to find it. It comes just before paragraph. Should have bought the book that the other one you did that has the. He speaks on the practice of a bodhisattva, and I wanted to read the words exactly so that because oh. Can I give it to somebody to find for me? It's not going to be far. It's going to be at this, I like visual. It's going to be in this section on this side of the page and right up here. And it'll talk about the bodhisattva, what the practice of a bodhisattva is. Is it circled or highlighted? And it's somewhere between here and here. Yep, it is highlighted. So whatever meditation practice you're doing, and that's an inward practice. So, and when you're doing certain kinds of practices, like if you have a yidam practice, and everybody is learning in the Holy Monk book, that's going to be your first your yidam practice, and that one doesn't require a state initiation. It's been offered. So we you're able to take that one up, and that's why I was just really happy about that, because you're going to see a difference as you start to do that Kuan Yin practice. And we went through that whole book just to lay a basis for you to be able to appreciate the practice, understanding that the meditation practice has different levels, and but all the levels, the understanding proceed from your mind, right? So if you consider it praying to a deity, then you're praying to a deity. If you see that as your own stainless original nature, then you're constantly looking at yourself within a perfected state. And instead of seeing your all the defilements that you can normally see, you'll begin to see more and more your own original nature, until one day you'll look in that mirror of the yidam practice and say, that's me, And when one knows that that's me, there will be a whole shift in how you view yourself, how you hold yourself, and what you can walk into. My daughter was in abusive. She was in an abusive relationship that made her think so little of herself, and I just couldn't figure it out, because she's so marvelous, and I was like, well, what was it, me? I mean, what happened in her life that some man could come into her life when she was young and take away all of her self-esteem, and make her think that she was whatever he wanted to make her think she was. And I just couldn't, she sure didn't get it from me. I couldn't understand it. I didn't know how to help her. And it was hidden from me for a long time, like 8 years. I'm talking about a long time. She just didn't come around, if she'd gotten beaten up or whatever. And so one day she came to me and she told me what was happening. Um, but she couldn't leave me. And there was nothing I could do. I said, well, I tell you what, when the day comes that you're ready to go, you call me. We'll be right there. But she had to come to that. One day, 10 years into that relationship, she made that phone call. And me and her father hopped on planes and we were right there. Now, it came because what she wouldn't do for herself, she would do for her daughter. So when it started transferring to the daughter, that's when she, you said, we've got to go. And they were in court that day because he was trying to take money. He was trying to take control of the daughter. He had taken her to court because he had more income. And he takes her to court. And that's because he was a drug dealer. And so he did have money, but that wasn't the environment for my granddaughter. And I saw him in court, and he comes over as sweet and charming as he has always been. Kissed me on the cheek. Hello, mother. This is just like a charming, charming man. Little guy too. She could beat him with one hand. That's why I didn't understand. She could beat him with one hand behind her back. And so I said, come here, I need to sit down and talk to you. And I did, and I said, now I'm going to talk to you like I really am your mother. I said, because I love you and I realize that you have a problem. And you're not going to be able to be with my daughter and my grandchildren anymore. It doesn't mean that I don't love you. It means you need to try to take care of your problem. I don't hate you for what's going on. I don't hate you for what you've done. I think she's crazy to have allowed it because you would have met Mr. Frying Pan a long time ago if it had been me, but she's been gracious to you, but it stops right here. It stops right here. And I will do everything within my power to my last breath because now she wants to be free. Before I couldn't do anything. I don't care what the court says. I don't care because the judge put me out of the courtroom, because she was just looking at the money and saying, well, it does look like he has and that's when I went off, and so she made me leave the courtroom. And I said, going out the door, pointing to the judge, she's not gonna be able to keep safe from me. And I left. But what I'm saying about this is it's this way in our walk. We get bludgeoned and bloodied, stripped of all of our confidence, of our knowing ourselves. Did you find it? Of our knowing ourselves. Thank you. No, this is the key. Okay, well, if I don't find it, then I'm not supposed to give it right now. In our daily walk, and all these practices of doing, they're pointing us back to our true original nature. Before we were obscured, before all of these defilements, before all of these habitual tendencies that have separated us and locked us away. So it's just a constant opening. It's an opening. And that's how your meditation should be. That's all it should be. We're not like concentrating to be concentrating to be concentrating, be concentrating. No. So we can sit on a pillow and concentrate. We can contemplate some action we did, and just solely look at that until we just become really focused on what we did, how we did it, why we did it, the best way to do it, what could we do better. And when we go through that whole time of concentrating on that subject, on that object, on that occurrence, on that event, on understanding that person, on executing or what a task that we have to execute, that is meditation. So something was introduced in this country. And I'm gonna tell you, when you go overseas and you're from the West and you go over there because you heard about meditation, you want to meditate, they just tell you sit right there, just sit. 6 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours, they don't even want to be bothered with you, just sit, and they just leave you with that. And we came back thinking, oh, that's the way to enlightenment. So I ask you, how many do you know that have gotten enlightened? That's your answer right there. Not, I was gonna say not many, I could say not any. So we shouldn't be vying for more of that. We need to be looking for what is true and what is real. So Buddha Master says that 80% of your practice should be in investigation of states as you're sitting, lying, standing, and walking. That just means like everything you're doing all day. 80%. That's how you're in meditation all day. When you're constantly focused and aware on what you're doing, what you're thinking, what you're saying. When you're not out there, eyes running rampant, itching ears to hear everything, but just kind of internally focused, then one becomes clear, one becomes bright. And there's a kind of settledness and an ease that takes place. But there's something else that happens. There's a kind of joy that manifests because you find yourself making life beautiful. It's suddenly not up to anybody else. It's not up to any situation. It's not up to any circumstance to bring me any joy. My joy is full solely by my inner reflection. That's it. And like I say, even when it's not good, there's still that inner reflection that gives me a joy because I see clearly what's happening here. I see clearly what's happening here. And once I'm clear on what's happening here, that's where the peace is. Oops, got a little bit more work to do right there in that area. Let me tweak that a little bit. Let me just, how we work in the garden, we piddle in the yard, we go that. We're like piddling in ourselves. Paying attention, giving attention to ourselves, loving ourselves. That's why we have no need of anybody else to love us. I love Paniwadi. I do love her, and I love her enough that she doesn't need anybody else's love. That's what I'm saying. I mean, and the way that I know how to love me, then that great wish is for another person to know that kind of love. You see what I'm saying? I mean, I can love them all I want, but I can't really help them. They have to have that own love for themselves. So we try to do for people what we cannot do for them. They have to do it for themselves. Why? We don't even know what to do for them until we know what works for us. So something happened this week, and I said some words. The words were okay. The words that I said were okay. But what I know, I'm always talking about the vehicle, right? That your words ride in. That vehicle was nasty. That, I was a little bit mad. And so the words were all right, but they weren't delivered in the right path, vehicle. And I know that. I know that. And I really regretted that I didn't wait a little bit before I delivered my words. I really regretted it. I mean, because I could really see, regardless of who somebody else is, regardless of whatever they do, what does that to do with me? Who I am, and what I do? What does that have to do with me? Nothing. And if I have a beef about what they're doing, and then I do something that is as bad as what they do, then what's the point? So we should never get toppled by situations that come into our life. If you can't handle it right now, don't handle it. That's the bottom line. And it was so clear to me the other day, and I could have made excuses for it in the past because that's where I was in my thinking in the past. That's where I was in my commitment in the past. Some things is just a no, and it got to be a hard no. That's where I was thinking in the past, but I'm no longer thinking that way now. Even when it's a no, it never has to be a hard no. It just needs to be no. And that's how you know when you're changing, when it becomes more important to do no harm than to be harmed. Then one knows that they are in the causal stage of bodhisattvahood. So, and that's why I wanted to read that little section, but I'll find it. It says that a bodhisattva, this is a bodhisattva meditation, you see. Because they're no longer thinking about themselves, but everything they do throughout the day is around the care for others. And until one starts to cultivate that mind, one can't even see what others need. We only see what we want to give or want to do for others. We cannot see what their true need is. And we can't even really address it. All of our giving is out of our selfishness. What I want to do for my daughter, what I want to do for my sangha, what I want to do for my, it's still personal. It's still selfish. So we haven't even stepped out of selfishness yet. Because like I want people to get the Dharma. I want to do this for people. I want to do that for people. But that's still an I wanting to do. You understand what I'm saying? That when we start really moving to that bodhisattva level, there won't be any thought of what I want to be, what I want to do. There will be just the natural arising of a cause and an action moving towards that condition without any I in it at all. I know there's I in what I do because when it reached a place where you couldn't help, I was attached to the helping, and I was attached to them not receiving the help in a good spirit. And so that's how I know. I'm like, oh, wow, I see that. So while I'm faulting them for not being whatever, respectful or appreciative or whatever, now I have to look at me instead. And then I see self all in there. So now, no fault with them. Roll all blame into one. I put it all back here now. Now they're free. They have done nothing to me, except been a good teacher for me to show me my shortcomings. And so in this time when I could be, if I had that other mind, I could be in like great suffering. Yeah. But now that I have this view, there's no suffering at all. And a great compassion has arisen for the other person. And I'm talking about it's genuinely there. Not like because on page 57 it says that's how you should feel, but because it's genuinely there. So I've been able to move beyond myself. Now this is, and see that I caused myself. They were just being who they are. I caused myself. I'm the one practicing. And suddenly all suffering over that, completely gone. Now, I could say that even though I felt that way, they could come to me tomorrow with a need. And if I could help them, I would help, because I'm not attached in that kind of way. My enemy can come and I will bandage him up and everything, But I still saw going deeper, cutting away deeper, and then finding, like excavating and finding a wellspring of water beneath the surface when one is thirsty. This is how this path gets. And it's not worldly, is what I'm saying. And it satisfies at a very deep level. It may not benefit you according to the world's mode of things. And yes, we have to do things to take care of ourselves because we're here. So I'm not saying throw everything to the wind. I'm saying recognize what's mundane and recognize, what is spiritual. And don't get confused about the two. Even in the supposedly outwardly spiritual things we do, like in our studying, in our meditation practice, in carrying out Dharma work, all of that's still out here. It's only whatever kind of refinement is occurring inside. That's the only work that matters. So when the Buddha would call his disciples together, they would convene for a talk, for a teaching, something to inspire, something to encourage, something to clarify, something to uproot, and mostly to let them know where their faults were so that they could see them. They could think deeply enough to see them and self-correct according to one's own will, one's own willingness. Am I willing to go this far? Am I willing to do this? Am I willing? A lot of times we don't like the way we are, but we want to save face because there's still something in it for us. Mostly like when we speak um, harshly to people who may be speaking harshly to us. What are you doing? You're saving face. And you'll continue to do that as long as it's important to you. And it's no longer important to you to save face. So I came to the conclusion this week that it's no longer important to me. I've come to that conclusion many times before, but even more securely this time. He talks about seeing danger in the slightest fault. To the one who doesn't have much understanding, that seems to imply being scared of everything, being scared to do anything. Don't touch this, don't taste this, don't handle that. That's not what it means. It means one can become so refined in their character that any words that wound another would not be worth uttering. Just hold your peace and let them go. No need to save me. No need to save me. No need for any bravado. And no need for any anger. Seeing the great suffering of a mind that acts in such a way. Otherwise, who would bodhisattvas be saving? The good don't need a bodhisattva. Right? So when we talk about wanting to be bodhisattvas, we have to know the good don't need one. That's not something you can just do. There has to be something deep within you. So maybe we might need to spend more time just finding out who we are. So that when we step forward, we can do so excellently. I'd like to encourage you to spend more time. He would call them together for a Dharma talk. And then after he gave a Dharma talk, he said, now, each one of you go to the root of a tree, to a hut, or to your abode and meditate. He didn't actually do it together. That's something that cropped up later. When we talk about how we really like meditating together. He said it's even difficult to study together because every single person's mind is different. So when one is speaking, he has to figure out how to speak to, if it's 20 people in the room, to 20 different minds. Some have high level, some have a low level of understanding, some have no level of no understanding of that, some like what we're talking about, some don't like, and you got to figure out how to give a talk for all of those minds. He said that's difficult enough. He said, but when one sits in meditation, one is going for an inward investigation. And he said, each one of you go to your own place and do that. But we come together to meditate. And I'm not so sure that it benefits us that much. So, well, I feel better when we're all together meditating. And this one strength, it's like the serenity kind of strengthens us. And that's okay, but it's okay to sit together in meditation. But you have to remember that outer thing is not it. It's not. We can come together to learn the steps on how to meditate, but then each person has to go and practice. They need to go into their inner sanctum, and they need to do that. So if you look at the different schools, the Theravadas, they come together in group meditation. Not the real monks over there. The real monks, they don't. I can tell you that. They don't come together. Because supposedly they're meditating all the time, right? So they don't come together. They come together when other people come. A monk will get everybody else together and sit and meditate with them. But in terms of them coming together as a community, they don't do that. But you know whether someone's meditating or not by how he interacts in the community. The Mahayanas, they basically chant, and they do like body dharmas, so that they're involving their whole body, speech, and mind. So there's a lot of bowing. So they're just not thinking about humility. They're actually prostrating. So there's a lot of prostrations. So that and their prayers, just the right thing, right words to say, so that they're inculcating their mind with the right thoughts, the right with Dharma speak. So after a while, it's so much in you that you start leaning, the mind starts inclining in that way, which I think is really, really good. It's just like the child learning songs, hear the song playing all the time. Child starts singing the song, and the words of the song start getting into it. You want to know what happened to this last generation? All the songs were about bitches and hoes. And that's why the girls started thinking of themselves in these kinds of ways. It's just the sound coming in constantly as they go about what they're doing, hooked to a catchy, a catchy melody and a catchy beat. And it just started entering into them. And without thinking about it, taking on something, the mind inclining to that. So that's those are methods, though, to fix the mind for it to have a certain attitude. So the Mahayanas do a lot of chanting. It also builds up a lot of energy in them, because Mahayanas work all day. That's what they do. They work. They do Dharma work all day long. And then the Vajrayanas, what they do is they work on the mind and the imagination and the visualization, and of what enlightened mind is. And then they imagine that that's their mind, and they sit there abiding in that space of time, imagining exactly what it feels like to have a mind of non-hatred. Like, so we have lots of things like when somebody's cutting off your arm, climbing a mountain of swords, so you're actually feeling something and sitting there with it, and it's like, though he slay me, I willingly lay myself down for him in service, or something like that. So we're really, really imagining in a way that we can experience something within this body. Now, We have them as three separate groups, but they're not three separate groups. These are practices that one person can apply according to what they need in their life to help them get the whole picture. But because we've chopped it up, we can't get the whole picture. Humpty Dumpty fell off the wall and can't put him back together again, But as we start to come back together to the whole council, to the method that I need at this moment to take care of that issue in my life or to shift my view, as we start to employ all of these, we will know at which time to pick this up or to pick that up. The same way we become discriminating about everything else, as we develop wisdom, we know when I need a coat versus when I need a sweater, and we will know which practice we need to pick up and for how long we need it until it has its desired result, not to just be doing a practice, but until it has its desired result. So we take it up for a reason, and we can substitute it for something else for a reason, but we're just not by rote doing things or going through things. Let everything have a purpose. And so as one starts to do that, one stops thinking about themselves as they did in the past, and they start thinking through the lens of their more enlightened nature until finally the chains of ignorance fall away and one can see clearly. And so it's not a challenging thing. It's an enjoyable journey. And if we approach it in this way, it doesn't become a task. It doesn't become a chore. It doesn't become, an academics. It doesn't become, it just becomes life. It just becomes life. And you don't have to stop doing things, not deliberately. But the more you take up this life, the more you'll stop doing things deliberately. Yeah. And it becomes easy, effortless. And yet we are putting forth a great amount of effort. But we're doing without doing. And ultimately nothing will go undone. Okay, so since who has Thursday? Okay, you got to talk about Thursday. Because since I didn't get to it, what I want to do Thursday, I would like to ask you to do Thursday, is to talk about your practice and the aspect of your practice, like how you're living the Dharma life. That's what I'm talking about. And I want to see what comes out of that. And I could always talk, drop of a hat. I can talk about my life. I can talk about my practice. I can talk about where I am in my practice. I can talk about the place that it holds. I can talk about how I engage life, how I see life through the lens of my practice, because it's always present with me. It's always there. It's the number one thing in my life. It's always there. And it's not because I'm a monk or because I'm a Dharma teacher. I mean, when I was a lay person, it was still number one in my life. It's the lens through which I saw life, and that I moved and I had my being, and that's where we're trying to get, that it becomes the lens through which we see life. And when we line up in the right way, then our vision becomes clear and our joy becomes full, even when we're not so good. We can just see our shortcomings and apply the four right efforts, right? To have regret, resolve to not do it again. You know, think of what we could do better and how we should do it better. And what's the fourth one? Oh, right. And take reliance on your own. As you know, the instructor to show us how to do it better. I think that's all I want to say today. May you be well and happy and peaceful. May no harm come to you and no danger. May you always be able to meet inevitable difficulties of life.